In the summer of 2018, a team of geologists drove into one of the most hostile places on Earth, Marble Bar, Western Australia. The thermometer read 123 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade. There wasn't much shade. The town holds a record most places would rather avoid, 160 consecutive days above 100 degrees. The rocks here bake. The air shimmers. Nothing moves at midday except the heat itself, rippling in waves across the red stone horizon. But the scientists weren't there for the heat. They were there for something far stranger. Deep in the bedrock beneath their boots, beneath the dust and the acacias clinging to dry riverbeds, they found something impossible: living microorganisms. Not fossils, living cells, thriving in conditions that would kill you, me, and every animal that has ever walked this planet. These organisms don't breathe oxygen. They can't. Oxygen, to them, is poison. They metabolize sulfur compounds, flourish in scalding water, and have remained virtually unchanged for over 3 billion years. What the team discovered wasn't alien life. It was something far more unsettling. It was a window, a portal into our own planet's past. A past so strange, so chemically backwards, so utterly removed from everything we call normal, that Earth itself 3 billion years ago would qualify as an alien world. And the rocks at Marble Bar are among the oldest witnesses we have. They've been waiting, silent, patient, holding the secret of what this planet really was before it became the world we know. Before we dive in, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Your support truly helps us continue this work. Thank you. 3 billion years. Say it slowly. 3,000 million years. It's a number so large it loses meaning almost immediately. To put it in perspective, humans have been around for 300,000 years. That's 1/100th of 1% of 3 billion years. Dinosaurs? They ruled for 165 million years and went extinct 66 million years ago. Impressive, until you realize that's still only 5% of our timeline. If the entire history of Earth, all 4.5 billion years, were compressed into a single calendar year, then 3 billion years ago would be early May, springtime. The planet is young, but not newborn. A lot has already happened. The question is, what kind of spring are we talking about? Because the Earth that existed in that ancient May bears almost no resemblance to the Earth outside your window right now. And the more we learn, the stranger it gets. Let's start with the most basic question. What would you see if you could stand on the surface of Earth 3 billion years ago? The first thing you'd notice is the light, or rather, the lack of it. Even at noon, with the sun directly overhead, the world would be cloaked in a dim, eerie twilight. Not because of clouds, not because of storms, but because the sun itself was different. Younger, weaker, fainter. Our sun is a middle-aged star. It formed about 4.5 billion years ago, roughly the same time as Earth. But stars don't shine at full strength right away. They build up, slowly, incrementally, over billions of years. The sun in the Archaean eon 3 billion years ago was only about 70% as luminous as it is today. 70%. That's a massive difference. It means the Earth was receiving 30% less solar energy than it does now. 30% less warmth. 30% less light. Here's the problem. With that little sunlight, Earth should have been frozen. Completely. A snowball spinning silently through space, its oceans locked in ice kilometers thick, its surface temperature plunging to -40 or 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The planet should have looked like Mars, or worse. There should be no rivers, no weather, no life. Nothing but sterile ice and rock under a dim, indifferent sun. But it wasn't. The rocks at Marble Bar tell a different story. Sedimentary layers, river channels carved into ancient stone, pillow basalts formed underwater, chemical signatures of flowing water, active weathering, dynamic coastlines. 3 billion years ago, Earth was not frozen. It was warm. It was wet. It was alive. This is the faint young sun paradox, and it's one of the most important unsolved puzzles in planetary science. How does a planet stay warm when its star isn't strong enough to keep it that way? The answer lies not in the rocks, but in the air. Take a breath. Right now, you're inhaling roughly 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen, with trace amounts of argon, carbon dioxide, and a few other gases. It's a stable mix. Predictable. Comfortable. 3 billion years ago, you'd suffocate in seconds. Because there was no oxygen. None. Not a trace. The air was a chemical cocktail that would read like a hazmat warning today. Carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor, nitrogen, yes, but far less than now. And hydrogen sulfide wafting up from volcanic vents, giving the breeze a rotten egg stench near the coasts. This atmosphere was toxic. But it was also Earth's salvation. Because those gases, carbon dioxide and methane especially, are what we call greenhouse gases. They have a molecular structure that allows visible light from the sun to pass through easily, but traps infrared radiation, the heat reflected back from the planet's surface. It's like wrapping the Earth in a thermal blanket. The faint sun's energy comes in, gets absorbed by the oceans and the rocks, and then, instead of radiating back out into space, it's caught, held, recycled. In 2019, a team from the University of Washington published a study in Nature Geoscience analyzing archaean atmospheric composition using isotopic proxies in ancient soils. Their models suggested carbon dioxide levels were somewhere between 100 and 1,000 times higher than today's pre-industrial levels. 100 to 1,000 times. That's not a typo. The air was thick with CO2. Add methane, produced by early microbial life, and you have an atmosphere capable of holding onto every scrap of heat the faint sun provided. But here's the twist. It wasn't perfectly efficient, because that same thick atmosphere created something else, something visible, a haze. Imagine looking up on the Archaean Earth. The sky isn't blue, it's orange, a perpetual sickly orange-brown twilight, even at midday. This is a photochemical haze, formed when ultraviolet light from the sun breaks apart methane molecules high in the atmosphere. The fragments recombine into complex hydrocarbons, tiny particles that hang suspended in the air, scattering light in long wavelengths. It's the same process that gives Saturn's moon Titan its thick, opaque atmosphere. Scientists at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center ran simulations in 2017 comparing Archaean Earth to Titan, and the match was startlingly close. The haze would have reduced incoming sunlight by another 10 to 15%. So the faint sun was made even fainter by the planet's own atmospheric chemistry. And yet, Earth stayed warm, barely, precariously, balanced on a knife edge between freezing and habitability, kept alive by an atmosphere that was, by modern standards, a suffocating poison. Now let's talk about the night sky. Because if the days were dim and hazy, the nights were something else entirely. Spectacular, alien, unrecognizable. You've probably seen pictures of the aurora borealis, the northern lights, shimmering green curtains draped across the Arctic sky, occasionally flickering red or purple. They're caused by charged particles from the solar wind colliding with oxygen and nitrogen in Earth's upper atmosphere, energized by our planet's magnetic field. The colors depend on which gas is being hit and at what altitude. Oxygen gives you green and red, nitrogen gives you purples and blues. But 3 billion years ago, there was no oxygen, so the auroras would have been a completely different color. Electric blue, vivid, pulsing blue veils rippling across the sky, created by the solar wind, slamming into carbon dioxide molecules in the upper atmosphere. A study published in the Journal of Geophysical Research in 2021 modeled archaean auroras and concluded they would have been not only more colorful, but far more widespread than today's. Why? Because Earth's magnetic field was different, chaotic, unstable. Today, our magnetosphere is generated by the motion of liquid iron in the outer core swirling around a solid inner core. That solid inner core acts like a stabilizer, anchoring the magnetic field and keeping the north and south poles relatively fixed. But 3 billion years ago, the inner core hadn't formed yet. The entire core was liquid, too hot to solidify, even under crushing pressure. Without that anchor, the magnetic field was weaker, more erratic. The poles could wander, flip, split into multiple poles, or collapse entirely for brief periods before reforming. What does that mean for the auroras? It means they weren't confined to the poles. They could appear anywhere. A traveler standing at the Archean equator might look up on any given night and see glowing blue curtains dancing overhead, rippling in silence, illuminating the hazy orange clouds below. The entire sky, from horizon to horizon, could come alive with light. It would have been beautiful, eerie, and a reminder that this planet's magnetic shield, the invisible barrier protecting it from the solar wind, was still finding its footing. There's geological evidence for this. In 2017, researchers at the University of Rochester analyzed magnetic minerals in 3.5 billion-year-old rocks from South Africa and Australia. The minerals' orientations were scattered, inconsistent, suggesting the magnetic field was indeed unstable during the Archean. It was there. It was protecting the planet. But it was younger, wilder, less predictable. So picture the scene. A dim orange sun setting over a dark horizon. The temperature dropping rapidly as the thin, hazy atmosphere struggles to hold the day's heat. And then, as full darkness falls, the sky ignites. Electric blue auroras flicker and pulse, casting faint shadows on the ground below. No moon yet, not the large one we know today. The moon was closer then, still drifting outward from its formation in the aftermath of a colossal impact. It would have appeared huge in the sky, looming perhaps 3 times larger than it does now, racing across the heavens and creating tides that were monstrous by modern standards. But we'll come back to that. First, let's go down. Beneath the auroras, beneath the hazy orange sky, down to the surface of the planet itself. What does the landscape look like? Here's where things get truly strange. Because if you were hoping to see continents, forests, mountains, river valleys, anything recognizable, you'd be disappointed. 3 billion years ago, Earth had almost no land. It was a water world. This revelation came from an unexpected place: oxygen isotopes. specifically a rare heavy form of oxygen called oxygen-18, which has 2 extra neutrons compared to the common oxygen-16. When rocks weather on continents, especially in the presence of clays, they preferentially lock away oxygen-18. That means the oceans lose some of their heavy oxygen, and any rocks that form on the seafloor end up depleted in oxygen-18. Today, that's exactly what we see. Ocean rocks have less oxygen-18 than you'd expect. But when geochemists started analyzing archaean rocks, they found something odd. The oxygen-18 levels were higher, much higher. The oceans 3 billion years ago were rich in heavy oxygen. Why? Because there weren't enough continents to absorb it. In 2020, a team at the University of Chicago published a comprehensive isotopic analysis of archaean marine sediments. Their conclusion was striking. Continental crust covered less than 5% of Earth's surface 3 billion years ago. 5%. Compare that to today's 29% land coverage, and you realize just how different the planet was. It wasn't a world with oceans. It was an ocean with occasional interruptions. Imagine it. A smooth blue, well, green. We'll get to that. Sphere spinning silently in space. Here and there, a dark volcanic island pokes above the waves. Maybe a chain of islands, an archipelago formed by a mantle plume punching through the thin oceanic crust. But no continents. No Australia. No Africa. No Americas. Just water. Vast, unbroken, globe-spanning water, occasionally disturbed by the peak of an underwater mountain or the smoking cone of a volcano. Why so little land? Because plate tectonics, the process that builds continents, was still in its infancy. The Earth's interior was hotter then. The crust was thinner, more fragile. Instead of the large, rigid tectonic plates we have today, the Archaean crust was probably broken into many smaller, constantly shifting pieces. Volcanic activity was rampant, but the process of forming stable, buoyant continental crust, rich in silica and lighter minerals, takes time. Billions of years. 3 billion years ago, Earth was still figuring it out, so we have a water world. But not a pleasant one, because those oceans weren't the sparkling blue we associate with tropical seas today. They were green, a murky, unsettling, rust-tinged green. The culprit? Iron. In modern oceans, dissolved iron is rare. It reacts almost immediately with oxygen in the water or the atmosphere, forming iron oxide, rust, which sinks to the bottom. Any iron that enters the ocean from rivers or hydrothermal vents gets pulled out fast, either by chemistry or by living organisms that use it. But 3 billion years ago, there was no oxygen, so iron could linger, dissolved, free, accumulating in seawater until the oceans were saturated with it. When conditions were right, that iron would react with other chemicals in the water and precipitate out as fine particles of iron carbonate or iron silicate. These minerals have a greenish tint. Enough of them suspended in seawater, and the entire ocean takes on a pale green hue, like verdigris on ancient bronze. We know this happened because of banded iron formations, or BIFs. These are among the most distinctive rocks in the Archaean and later Proterozoic record. Alternating layers of iron-rich and iron-poor sediment, stacked like the pages of a book, sometimes hundreds of meters thick. They're found on every continent, a testament to global oceanic conditions that simply don't exist today. In 2016, researchers at Caltech analyzed the chemistry of BIFS from Western Australia and concluded that Archaean seawater contained iron concentrations hundreds of times higher than modern levels. Hundreds of times. So the oceans were green, the sky was orange, the sun was dim, the auroras were blue. Earth 3 billion years ago was a world of inverted colors, a photographic negative of the planet we know. And in those green oceans, something was stirring. Life, invisible, microscopic, but absolutely everywhere. The origin of life is still one of science's greatest mysteries. We don't know exactly when it started, or where, or how. But we do know it happened early. Very early. The oldest chemical hints of life, isotopic signatures in carbon trapped in ancient rocks, date back at least 3.8 billion years. Some researchers argue for even earlier. By 3 billion years ago, life wasn't just present. It was established, diverse, thriving. But if you dove into those green Archaean oceans hoping to see fish or coral or anything recognizable, you'd see nothing. Life was entirely microbial, single-celled. Bacteria and archaea, the two great domains of life that still dominate Earth's biosphere today, even if we don't notice them. No plants, no animals, no fungi, nothing you could see without a microscope. Yet the oceans were teeming. To understand where this life lived and what it was doing, we need to think about energy. All life, without exception, needs energy to survive. It needs to break down molecules, build new ones, move, reproduce, repair damage. That energy has to come from somewhere. Today, most of the energy flow on Earth starts with sunlight. Plants and algae capture it through photosynthesis, and everything else eats the plants or eats something that ate the plants. It's a solar-powered biosphere. But 3 billion years ago, photosynthesis was still in its infancy. Most life didn't use sunlight at all. Instead, it relied on chemistry, chemosynthesis, the process of extracting energy from chemical reactions, usually involving compounds dissolved in water. And the best place to find those compounds was at hydrothermal vents. Picture the deep sea floor, far below the reach of even the dim Archaean sunlight. Pressure is immense. The water is cold, just a few degrees above freezing. But here and there, the crust is thin, fractured. Seawater seeps down through cracks, gets heated by magma chambers below, dissolves minerals, and then jets back up through chimneys built from precipitated metals. These are hydrothermal vents, black smokers, white smokers, depending on the chemistry. Around these vents, the water is hot, scalding, sometimes exceeding 200 degrees Celsius, kept liquid only by the crushing pressure. And it's rich in chemicals: hydrogen sulfide, methane, iron, manganese, compounds that are energetically unstable, ready to react. To a modern human, these vents are hellish. But to early life, they were paradise. In 2014, researchers studying the Lost City hydrothermal field in the mid-Atlantic, a modern vent system, discovered thriving microbial communities living in conditions almost identical to those on Archaean Earth. No sunlight, high temperatures, chemistry-based metabolism. Genetic analysis of these microbes revealed they belong to some of the most ancient lineages of life on Earth, virtually unchanged for billions of years. They are living fossils, molecular relics of the Archaean. 3 billion years ago, vents like these dotted the seafloor, and around each one, life clustered. Thick, fuzzy mats of bacteria and archaea clinging to the chimney walls, feeding on the sulfur and methane billowing out of the vent. These were the cities of the Archaean world, Not cities of stone or steel, but cities of cells. Billions upon billions of microbes, layered together, held in place by a sticky extracellular slime they secreted. Each layer specialized. The bottom layer, closest to the vent, thrived in the hottest water and fed directly on the vent's output. The next layer up fed on the waste products of the first, and so on. A vertical ecosystem, stratified by temperature and chemistry, rising like a microscopic skyscraper around every hydrothermal chimney. These vent communities were stable, successful. They could have persisted indefinitely, recycling energy and matter in a closed loop. But life, by its nature, expands. It innovates. It explores. And after a few 100 million years, the vents were getting crowded. Somewhere, in some shallow coastal pool or sunlit lagoon, a mutation occurred. A chance reshuffling of genetic material in a microbe that changed everything. This mutant developed the ability to capture energy, not from chemicals, but from light. The first photosynthesis. It wasn't the photosynthesis we know today. Not yet. Early photosynthesis didn't produce oxygen. It used different chemical reactions, different pigments, different metabolic pathways. But it worked, and it opened up an entirely new ecological niche. Anywhere the dim sun's light could penetrate the water, this new life could live. The advantage was enormous. Chemical energy is concentrated, localized. You have to be near a vent or a seep or some other source. But light is everywhere, diffuse, abundant, free for the taking. Photosynthetic microbes could spread out, colonize vast areas, cover every sunlit surface in the shallow oceans. And that's exactly what they did. By 3 billion years ago, the shallow coastal waters of the Archaean Earth were blanketed with microbial mats. Thin layers of photosynthetic bacteria spread flat across the seafloor, soaking up the dim sunlight filtering through the hazy orange sky and the green-tinged water. These mats were slimy, slippery, and incredibly resilient. When waves tore them apart, they healed. When sediment covered them, they grew back. They were the first global ecosystem, the first time life dominated a planet's surface. Today, microbial mats are rare, outcompeted by algae, grazed by animals, disrupted by burrowing worms. But in a few special places, they persist. Shark Bay in Western Australia hosts some of the most extensive modern microbial mats on Earth. They look unimpressive, lumpy greenish-brown crusts in shallow, salty water. But they're direct descendants, ecological and possibly genetic, of those Archaean communities. Standing in Shark Bay, you're looking at a living fossil, a glimpse of Earth as it was 3 billion years ago. And some of those ancient mats left behind fossils. Not body fossils, they were too soft for that, but structural fossils, stromatolites. A stromatolite forms when a microbial mat gets dusted with sediment. In modern environments, that sediment would smother the mat. Game over. But Archaean microbes evolved a survival strategy. They could sense light even through a thin layer of sand, and they could grow upward through the sediment, re-establishing themselves on the new surface. When another layer of sediment arrived, they'd do it again, and again. Over time, this process built up domed, layered structures, like biological stalagmites, with the living mat always on top and the dead, mineralized layers below. Stromatolites are one of the most important fossils in Earth's history. They're found in rocks spanning from 3.5 billion years ago all the way to the present. Wherever you find stromatolites, you know you're looking at the remains of a shallow, sunlit marine environment where microbial life was thriving. And in the Archaean, they were everywhere. In 2021, a comprehensive survey published in Geobiology analyzed stromatolite distribution in Archaean rock formations worldwide. The conclusion was staggering. Stromatolites covered an estimated 60% of all shallow marine environments during the Archaean. 60%. The planet's coastal zones were paved with them. Vast underwater meadows of microbial domes, each one a thriving city of billions of cells, all working together to capture the faint sun's energy and build themselves upward, layer by patient layer, toward the light. These were Earth's first forests, not made of wood, but of slime and stone. And they were astonishingly successful. For over 1 billion years, stromatolites dominated the planet's shallow seas. They would continue to do so well into the Proterozoic, until the rise of grazing animals finally brought their reign to an end. But 3 billion years ago, there were no grazers, no predators, no competition. Just endless generations of photosynthetic microbes stacking themselves toward the sky, building reefs and ridges that altered ocean chemistry and shaped the flow of currents. And buried in their layered stone archives is evidence of something profound. A change. A chemical revolution. An innovation that would eventually transform Earth from a green water world into the oxygen-rich blue sky planet we know today. Because some of those photosynthetic microbes, somewhere around 3 billion years ago, stumbled onto a new trick, a new way of capturing light energy, one that was vastly more efficient than anything that came before. Oxygenic photosynthesis, the kind that plants use today, the kind that splits water molecules, captures the hydrogen, and releases the oxygen as waste. It was an accident, a mutation, a random evolutionary experiment, and it would change everything. But not right away, because for the next 800 million years, all that oxygen would vanish, absorbed, consumed, hidden. Earth's atmosphere would remain oxygen-free, its skies orange, its oceans green. Where did the oxygen go? Why did it take so long to accumulate? And what happened when it finally did? That's where the story gets truly strange. In 2018, a team of microbiologists descended nearly 2.5 kilometers beneath the surface of the Earth. Not metaphorically, literally. They took an elevator down into the Kidd Creek mine in Ontario, Canada, one of the deepest operational mines on the planet. The air was hot. The walls dripped with mineral-laden water. The pressure was crushing. And there, in isolated pockets of ancient groundwater that hadn't seen the surface in over 1 billion years, they found life. Not fossils, living bacteria, thriving in total darkness, feeding on hydrogen gas produced by chemical reactions between water and iron-rich rock. These organisms don't need sunlight. They don't need oxygen. They're chemosynthetic, just like the vent communities we talked about earlier. And genetic analysis revealed they belong to lineages that split off from the rest of life billions of years ago. The discovery at Kidd Creek wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a decade-long scientific effort that fundamentally changed our understanding of where life exists on this planet. The project was called the Deep Carbon Observatory, and it ran from 2009 to 2019. Over those 10 years, more than 1,000 scientists from 52 countries drilled, sampled, and analyzed rock and water from the deepest, most inaccessible parts of Earth's crust. What they found was staggering. Life exists, not just on the surface, not just in the oceans, but deep within the planet itself. Kilometers down, in cracks and fissures and porous rock formations that have been isolated from the surface world for hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of years. And it's not just surviving down there, it's thriving. In 2018, researchers drilling into the seafloor off the coast of Japan retrieved core samples from more than 2.5 kilometers beneath the ocean floor. That's nearly 5 kilometers below the surface of the ocean itself, buried under immense pressure and surrounded by rock that hasn't seen daylight since the age of the dinosaurs. When they analyzed those samples in the lab, they found microbial cells, alive, active, metabolizing. The cells were small, incredibly small, near the lower limit of what's physically possible for a living organism. They reproduced slowly, perhaps once every 1,000 years. Their metabolism was barely detectable, but they were alive. And genetic sequencing revealed they belonged to bacterial lineages that diverged from all other known life more than 3 billion years ago. These weren't recent colonizers, organisms that had somehow migrated down from the surface. These were ancient relics, living fossils that had been down there since the Archaean, cut off from the surface biosphere, evolving in isolation in the deep, hot, pressurized darkness. The Deep Carbon Observatory's final report, published in 2019, estimated that the total biomass of this subsurface biosphere is between 15 and 23 billion tons of carbon. To put that in perspective, all humans on Earth combined represent about 0.06 billion tons of carbon. The deep biosphere outweighs humanity by a factor of 300. It might account for 70% of all bacterial and archaeal cells on the planet. Think about that, 70%. We think of life as something that happens on the surface, in forests and oceans and soil. We picture ecosystems as sunlit, vibrant, visible. But the truth is, most life on Earth exists in a place we never see. In the dark, in the deep, in conditions that would kill us instantly. And it's been there since the beginning. This isn't a new development. This isn't life adapting to fill a niche opened up by modern geology. This is the original biosphere. The deep, hot, chemical-rich environment where life first appeared. While we've been focused on the surface, evolution's greatest experiment, the colonization of sunlight and oxygen and open air, the deep biosphere has simply continued, unchanged, unbothered, quietly metabolizing in the dark, just as it did 3 billion years ago. Scientists have a term for this. They call the organisms living down there intraterrestrials, not extraterrestrials, not surface dwellers, intraterrestrials, life from inside the Earth. And the deeper we drill, the more we find. In 2012, researchers exploring a gold mine in South Africa, nearly 3 kilometers down, discovered flowing water. The water was hot, around 60 degrees Celsius, and completely isolated from the surface. Radioactive decay of uranium in the surrounding rock was splitting water molecules, producing hydrogen gas, which microbes in the water were using as an energy source. This ecosystem was entirely independent of the sun. No photosynthesis. No connection to the surface biosphere. Just rocks, water, radioactivity, and life. The microbes weren't even closely related to anything we'd seen before. Genetic analysis suggested they represented entirely new branches of the tree of life, phyla that had diverged billions of years ago and had been down there ever since, hidden, waiting to be discovered. Similar ecosystems have been found in mines and boreholes all over the world. Canada, Scandinavia, the American Midwest, China. Everywhere we look deep enough, we find life, and not just bacteria. In some samples, researchers have found archaea, the other great domain of microbial life. Single-celled organisms that are biochemically distinct from bacteria, often even more adapted to extreme conditions. Some of these archaea are methanogens, producing methane gas as a metabolic byproduct, just like their ancestors did in the Archean oceans 3 billion years ago. It's a parallel world, a shadow biosphere, existing alongside ours but utterly separate. And the more we learn about it, the more we realize that the surface biosphere, the one we're part of, might be the exception. The deep biosphere might be the rule. Because here's the thing, life on the surface is vulnerable. Asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, ice ages, mass extinctions. The surface has been repeatedly sterilized, or nearly so, over Earth's history. But the deep biosphere? It's protected, insulated, buffered by kilometers of rock. An asteroid could hit, a supervolcano could erupt, the atmosphere could freeze, and down below the intraterrestrials would barely notice. They just keep metabolizing, one slow generation at a time, waiting for the surface to calm down. In fact, some scientists think the deep biosphere might be life's true refuge, the place where it survives catastrophes. After a major extinction event on the surface, life might recolonize from below, with hardy subsurface microbes migrating back up to repopulate a sterilized world. It's happened before. It could happen again. And if it's true on Earth, it might be true elsewhere. Think about Mars. The surface today is a frozen, radiation-blasted desert, hostile to life as we know it. But deep beneath the surface, there might be liquid water, geothermal heat, chemical reactions between water and rock producing hydrogen, all the ingredients for a subsurface biosphere. Mars might be dead on the surface, but alive below. In 2022, the European Space Agency selected the drilling site for a future mission to Mars. Not a rover, not a lander, a drill, capable of reaching depths of 2 meters, far deeper than anything we've attempted before. The goal is to search for subsurface life, or at least evidence that it once existed. Because if Mars ever had a deep biosphere, it might still be there, waiting. And then there are the ocean worlds: Europa, Enceladus, Titan, Ganymede, moons orbiting the giant planets, covered in thick shells of ice, with vast liquid water oceans beneath. These oceans are dark. No sunlight penetrates the ice, but they're not sterile. Tidal heating from their parent planets keeps the water liquid and drives hydrothermal activity on the seafloors. Vents, chemistry, energy. Europa's ocean might be 100 kilometers deep. Enceladus is already venting water into space, plumes we can sample directly. These aren't just hypothetical habitats. They're real, present, accessible. And if Earth's deep biosphere teaches us anything, it's that life doesn't need sunlight. It doesn't need oxygen. It just needs water, energy, and time. The Europa Clipper mission, launching in 2028, will fly by Europa dozens of times, mapping its ice shell, measuring its ocean depth, and analyzing those plumes for organic molecules. If it finds them, the next mission will go deeper. A lander, a submersible, a probe that melts through the ice and dives into the ocean below, searching for life in the dark. And if we find it, it will almost certainly be microbial, chemosynthetic, ancient, a biosphere that looks nothing like ours but everything like Earth's deep subsurface, another intraterrestrial world. But here's where it gets really interesting. Some researchers are starting to ask a provocative question. What if life didn't start on the surface? What if it started in the deep biosphere and only later colonized the surface? Think about it. The early Earth was a violent place. Impacts, radiation, rapid temperature swings. The surface was unstable, chaotic, hostile. But deep below, insulated by rock, warmed by geothermal heat, fed by chemical reactions, the environment was stable, protected. It's exactly the kind of place where fragile early life could take hold and persist long enough to evolve complexity. There's even a hypothesis, proposed by microbiologist William Martin and others, that life originated not in a tidal pool or a surface ocean, but in hydrothermal vents deep underground. Alkaline vents, where warm, mineral-rich water from the Earth's interior mixed with cooler, slightly acidic seawater. The chemical gradients across the vent walls could have driven the first metabolic reactions, the first protocells, the first life. If that's true, then the deep biosphere isn't a refuge. It's the cradle, the origin, the place where life began. And the surface biosphere, everything we see and experience and depend on, is a later development, an expansion, a colonization event. Life went up, not down. And if that's the case, then every time we drill into the Earth and find living microbes kilometers below the surface, we're not discovering some strange extremophile niche. We're discovering life's homeland, the place it came from, the place it's been all along. The Deep Carbon Observatory project ended in 2019, but the work continues. New drilling projects are underway, new genetic surveys, new attempts to culture and study these intraterrestrial organisms. Every sample raises new questions. How deep does life go? What's the temperature limit? The pressure limit? How slow can metabolism get and still be called life? One study, published in 2021, analyzed microbial DNA from samples taken 6 kilometers below the surface in China. 6 kilometers. That's deeper than the deepest ocean trench. And they found cells. Not many, not active, but present, clinging to existence in rock so hot and so pressurized that it's barely solid. Another study, from 2023, used seismic imaging to map potential habitable zones in Earth's crust. The researchers estimated that there might be microbial ecosystems extending as deep as 10 kilometers down, wherever there's water, heat, and fractured rock. 10 kilometers. That's a substantial fraction of the continental crust. If they're right, the deep biosphere isn't just a hidden layer beneath our feet. It's a thick, sprawling, three-dimensional web of life, threaded through the entire planet. Bigger than all the oceans combined, older than all surface ecosystems, and almost entirely unexplored. We like to think of ourselves as the dominant form of life on Earth. We've covered the planet, built cities, reshaped ecosystems, left our mark on every continent. But by biomass, by diversity, by sheer endurance, the intraterrestrials dwarf us. They were here long before us. They'll be here long after. And the humbling part, they don't need us. They don't need the sun. They don't need oxygen. They exist in a completely separate biosphere, one that has run in parallel with ours for billions of years, indifferent to everything happening on the surface. Which brings us to a deeply unsettling thought. What if most life in the universe is like this? Hidden, subsurface, invisible. When we search for extraterrestrial life, We look for biosignatures in atmospheres: oxygen, methane, phosphine. We look for surface water, vegetation, radio signals. We're searching for life like ours: surface life, photosynthetic life, technological life. But what if that's rare? What if the universe is full of intraterrestrial biospheres, hidden beneath ice or rock or sand, metabolizing slowly in the dark, never developing photosynthesis, never oxygenating their atmospheres, never becoming visible? We'd never find them. They'd be invisible to our telescopes, undetectable by our current methods. A planet could be teeming with life, billions upon billions of microbial cells in its crust and subsurface oceans, and we'd classify it as dead. This is what some researchers call surface chauvinism, the assumption that life, real life, happens on the surface. But Earth's history and its present suggests otherwise. The surface is the exception. The deep is the norm. And if we ever hope to find life elsewhere, we need to stop looking up and start looking down. Because the universe might not be full of forests and oceans and breathable atmospheres. It might be full of rocks and ice and darkness, with life hidden inside. The Archaean Earth had both: a thriving surface biosphere, microbial mats and stromatolites soaking up the dim sunlight, and a vast subsurface biosphere, intraterrestrials metabolizing in the deep. The two were connected, cycling matter and energy between them, but they were separate, distinct, parallel. And today, 3 billion years later, that's still true. Most of us live our lives completely unaware of the deep biosphere. We walk on the surface, breathe the air, depend on photosynthesis. But beneath our feet, in mines and boreholes and submarine sediments, the intraterrestrials continue their slow, patient existence, just as they have since the beginning. They are the living archaean, not a fossil, not a memory, but a continuous, unbroken thread of life, stretching back 3.5 billion years, older than oxygen, older than animals, older than continents. When we ask what Earth was like 3 billion years ago, part of the answer is look down, because it's still there, still alive, still waiting. And maybe, just maybe, when we finally drill through the ice on Europa or dig into the regolith on Mars, we'll find the same thing. Another deep biosphere, another Archaean world, alive, hidden, patient. Because if Earth teaches us anything, it's that life doesn't need the light. It just needs a crack in the rock, a drop of water, and time. And the universe has plenty of all three. And it's a reminder that the story we're telling isn't just ancient history. It's a window into life's versatility, its tenacity, and its ability to persist in conditions we once thought impossible. But let's go back. 3 billion years ago, surface world, shallow seas, stromatolite reefs basking in the dim orange sunlight. Because something is about to happen. Something that will eventually poison those reefs, collapse that orange sky, and turn the green oceans blue. Oxygenic photosynthesis. The microbes responsible are called cyanobacteria. You might know them as blue-green algae, though they're not algae at all. They're bacteria, single-celled prokaryotes, no nucleus, no fancy internal machinery. But they possess one of the most sophisticated biochemical systems ever evolved, the ability to split water. Water, H2O, 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen atom. It seems simple, but the chemical bonds holding water together are strong, incredibly strong. Breaking them requires a lot of energy. Early photosynthetic organisms used simpler compounds like hydrogen sulfide or ferrous iron as their hydrogen source. but those compounds are rare, localized. Water, on the other hand, is everywhere. A photosynthetic organism that could crack water open would have access to an effectively unlimited supply of hydrogen. It would be an energy revolution. And that's exactly what cyanobacteria did. They evolved a complex protein structure called photosystem II, which uses light energy to rip electrons away from water molecules, splitting them into hydrogen, which the cell uses, and oxygen, which it doesn't. Oxygen to the cyanobacteria is garbage, waste, exhaust. They dump it into the surrounding water, and from there it bubbles up into the atmosphere. When did this happen? Pinning down the exact date is tricky, but genetic and geological evidence points to around 3 billion years ago, give or take 100 million years. In 2018, a team at MIT analyzed the genomes of modern cyanobacteria and used molecular clock techniques to estimate when oxygenic photosynthesis first evolved. Their best estimate was 3.0 billion years ago, almost exactly the time period we're discussing. So 3 billion years ago, somewhere in a shallow, sunlit sea, a population of cyanobacteria began producing oxygen. At first, it would have been a tiny trickle, a few molecules here and there, quickly consumed by chemical reactions in the water. But the cyanobacteria were successful. They spread, colonized new areas, joined the stromatolite cities, adding their oxygen-producing metabolism to the layered microbial communities. And slowly, incrementally, the amount of oxygen being produced began to increase. You'd think this would be cause for celebration. Oxygen is life, right? It's what we breathe. It's what powers complex multicellular organisms. It's the reason you can run, think, exist. But 3 billion years ago, oxygen was a pollutant, a poison. Almost all life on Earth at that time was anaerobic, meaning it didn't use oxygen and couldn't tolerate it. To those organisms, oxygen was as toxic as cyanide is to us. It reacts with cellular machinery, produces damaging free radicals, and destroys delicate biochemical structures. For the anaerobic biosphere, the rise of oxygen was an existential threat. And yet, the oxygen didn't accumulate. Not for another 800 million years. This is one of the great puzzles of Earth history. If cyanobacteria evolved 3 billion years ago and started pumping out oxygen, why didn't the atmosphere change immediately? Where did all that oxygen go? The answer is written in those banded iron formations, the green oceans. Remember, archaean seawater was saturated with dissolved iron. When oxygen, produced by cyanobacteria, encountered that iron, it reacted instantly, forming iron oxide, rust. The rust precipitated out of the water as fine particles, drifted down to the seafloor and accumulated in thick layers. Those layers are the banded iron formations. Each band represents a pulse of oxygen production and iron precipitation. The process repeated over and over for hundreds of millions of years until the oceans were stripped of their dissolved iron. But it wasn't just the oceans. Oxygen also reacted with methane in the atmosphere. Methane, remember, was one of the key greenhouse gases keeping the Archean Earth warm. Oxygen and methane don't get along. They react, forming carbon dioxide and water. Less methane means less greenhouse effect. And with the sun still faint, that could spell disaster. There's evidence from glacial deposits dated to around 2.4 billion years ago that Earth did experience a severe ice age around this time. Some researchers call it the Huronian glaciation. It may have been triggered by the oxygen-methane reaction. a climate catastrophe caused by the very life that was trying to thrive. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. 3 billion years ago, the oxygen is still being mopped up by the oceans. The atmosphere remains oxygen-free. The skies are still orange. The auroras still blue. Life is still microbial, still confined to the seas. And yet, change is coming. Slow, invisible, but inevitable. The question is, how long can a planet stay in this state? How long can a world remain locked in the microbial stage, with a toxic atmosphere, dim skies, and green oceans? Earth took 2 billion years to transition from the Archaean to the Proterozoic, and another 1.5 billion to see the rise of complex life. That's 3.5 billion years, 77% of Earth's history spent as a microbial world. Is that normal? Or is Earth an outlier? In the search for extraterrestrial life, this question matters a lot. Because if most planets get stuck in an Archaean-like state, if the jump to complex life is rare or difficult or dependent on unlikely coincidences, then the universe might be full of microbial worlds and almost nothing else. This is related to something called the Great Filter, a concept from the Fermi paradox. The Fermi paradox asks, if the universe is so big and so old, where is everybody? Where are all the aliens? One possible answer is the Great Filter. The idea that somewhere between the formation of a planet and the rise of a spacefaring civilization, there's a bottleneck, a step so difficult that most planets never make it through. Maybe the filter is abiogenesis, the origin of life. Maybe life itself is incredibly rare. But Earth's history suggests otherwise. Life appeared fast, within a few 100 million years of the planet becoming habitable. That seems almost easy. Maybe the filter is the transition to complex cells, eukaryotes, cells with nuclei like ours. That took longer, nearly 2 billion years. It required one cell engulfing another in a symbiotic merger that created mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell. That's a more plausible filter. Or maybe the filter is oxygenic photosynthesis, the ability to crack water and flood the atmosphere with oxygen. Without oxygen, you can't have complex, energy-intensive life. And as we've seen, it took Earth billions of years to make that transition. If the Great Filter is behind us, if we've already passed it, then the universe might be full of intelligent life, and we just haven't found it yet. But if the filter is ahead of us, if the hard step is yet to come, then we might be alone, or nearly so. Either way, studying the Archaean Earth isn't just about understanding our past. It's about understanding our place in the universe. And here's the kicker. We might be looking at Archaean Earths right now, today, through our telescopes. In 2023, the James Webb Space Telescope began analyzing the atmospheres of exoplanets, worlds orbiting distant stars. JWST can detect the chemical fingerprints of gases in those atmospheres by watching how starlight filters through them during a transit. And one of the things it's looking for is methane, lots of methane. Combined with carbon dioxide and water vapor, but no oxygen. That's the signature of an Archaean atmosphere. Several candidate planets have already been identified. Worlds slightly smaller than Earth, orbiting in the habitable zones of their stars, with thick, hazy atmospheres rich in methane. We don't know if they have life, but if they do, it's probably microbial. Photosynthetic bacteria carpeting shallow seas, building stromatolites, slowly, over billions of years. transforming their worlds. We might be watching in real time the process that Earth went through 3 billion years ago. And if that's true, if archaean stage planets are common, then the universe is far stranger and more diverse than we imagined. Not empty, not sterile, but teeming with life. Just not life we'd recognize. Because here's the humbling truth. Complex life, oxygen-breathing life, life like us is the exception, the outlier. For most of Earth's history, and possibly for most of the universe, life is microbial, single-celled, invisible, thriving in conditions we'd call extreme. We are the aliens on our own planet. Every breath you take is poison to 80% of Earth's history. The air you breathe, the blue sky above you, the oxygen-rich oceans, these are not normal. They're the result of a 3.5 billion year experiment, a slow-motion revolution driven by tiny microbes that stumbled onto a new way of capturing sunlight. And it almost didn't happen. Think about it. If the cyanobacteria hadn't evolved, if oxygenic photosynthesis had never appeared, Earth would still be an archaean world. Orange skies, green oceans, microbial mats, no plants, no animals, no humans. The planet would be alive, thriving even, but utterly unrecognizable. Or what if oxygen had accumulated faster? What if the iron in the oceans had been depleted earlier and oxygen levels spiked 2.5 billion years ago instead of 2.4? The methane greenhouse would have collapsed. The Earth would have frozen. The Huronian glaciation might have turned into a permanent snowball state, and life might never have recovered. The timing mattered. The balance mattered. Earth threaded a needle, surviving by sheer luck and the chaotic interplay of geology, chemistry, and biology. And we're the result. But let's bring this back to the rocks, back to Marble Bar. Because those ancient stones aren't just telling us about the past, they're telling us about the future. In 2026, NASA plans to launch the Mars Sample Return mission. Perseverance rover, currently exploring Jezero crater on Mars, has been collecting samples of rock and soil from what was once a river delta, 3.5 billion years ago. The same age as the rocks at Marble Bar. Those samples will be returned to Earth and analyzed in labs with equipment far more sophisticated than anything we can send to Mars. Scientists are looking for the same things they found at Marble Bar: stromatolites, chemical signatures of life, evidence of ancient water. If Mars ever had life, it would have been during its Archaean equivalent. A brief window early in the planet's history when water flowed and the atmosphere was thick enough to keep it liquid. Mars today is a frozen desert. Its atmosphere is thin, its water locked in polar ice. But 3.5 billion years ago, it might have looked a lot like Archaean Earth. And if we find fossils, or even just chemical hints of life, it will revolutionize our understanding of biology's place in the universe. Because if life arose independently on 2 planets in the same solar system, then the universe is almost certainly full of it. In 2028, NASA will launch the Europa Clipper mission. Europa is a moon of Jupiter, covered in a thick shell of ice. But beneath that ice is a liquid water ocean kept warm by tidal heating from Jupiter's immense gravity. That ocean might be twice the volume of all of Earth's oceans combined. And it's been there, stable, for billions of years. Europa's ocean is dark, cold, but it has water, minerals from the rocky seafloor, and energy from hydrothermal vents. It's an Archaean ocean, preserved in ice, orbiting a giant planet. Clipper will fly by Europa dozens of times, analyzing its ice shell, measuring the ocean's depth, and looking for plumes of water vapor erupting from cracks. If those plumes exist, future missions could fly through them, collect samples, and search for life. Life that might look a lot like the vent communities on Archaean Earth. And then there are the exoplanets. JWST is just getting started. Over the next decade, it will analyze hundreds of atmospheres, looking for biosignatures: oxygen, methane, phosphine, dimethyl sulfide, chemicals that on Earth are produced by life. But we need to be careful, because an oxygen-rich atmosphere, like Earth's today, is a strong biosignature. But an Archaean atmosphere, rich in methane and carbon dioxide, is ambiguous. It could be biological, or it could be geological. We need more data, better models, a deeper understanding of how planets evolve. That's why studying the Archaean matters. It's not just academic, it's practical. It's helping us design the missions, build the instruments, and interpret the data that will answer one of humanity's oldest questions. Are we alone? The Archaean Earth suggests we might not be. Because if life can arise quickly, survive in extreme conditions, and persist for billions of years in a state we'd barely recognize, then the universe has had plenty of time and plenty of opportunities to create it. But it also suggests that complex life, intelligent life, might be vanishingly rare. Because the leap from microbes to multicellular organisms took Earth 2 billion years. And it might have required a series of unlikely accidents. The evolution of oxygenic photosynthesis, the oxidation of the oceans, the oxygenation of the atmosphere, the rise of eukaryotes, each step dependent on the one before, each step a potential failure point. If we're looking for aliens, we might find them, but they might be invisible, microbial, living in oceans beneath ice, or clinging to hydrothermal vents, or forming stromatolites in shallow seas under orange skies. And if we're looking for civilizations, for radio signals or megastructures or starships, we might be searching in vain. Because the universe might be full of Archaean Earths, planets locked in an eternal microbial spring, never progressing, never changing, just endlessly cycling carbon and methane and iron under dim young suns. That's the sobering possibility. The universe is alive, but it's not aware. Or maybe we're the first, the lucky ones, the planet that made it through. And if that's true, then we have a responsibility, not just to ourselves, but to the cosmos. Because if intelligence is rare, then every intelligent species that arises has a duty to preserve itself, to spread, to ensure that the universe doesn't remain silent forever. But there's another question, one that's harder to ask and harder to answer. How long does the window stay open? Earth spent 3.5 billion years as a microbial world. Then, relatively suddenly, complex life appeared. Animals. The Cambrian explosion, 540 million years ago. Since then, life has diversified, colonized the land, evolved intelligence. But it's been fragile. 5 major mass extinctions, countless smaller ones, climate shifts, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and now us, humans, changing the planet faster than it's changed in millions of years. What if the window is closing? What if Earth is transitioning, not forward, but backward? What if we're pushing the planet toward a new state, one that's less hospitable to complex life? Rising carbon dioxide levels, ocean acidification, methane release from thawing permafrost. These are all things that characterize the Archaean. We're not going back to a full Archaean state, of course. The sun is too bright now, the continent's too extensive. But we might be heading toward a hybrid, a planet with some Archaean characteristics and some modern ones. A planet that's less stable, less predictable. And if that happens, complex life might not survive. Microbes will. They always do. But us, the animals, the ecosystems we depend on, that's uncertain. The Archaean Earth is a reminder that our planet is not static. It's dynamic, ever-changing. And the state we call normal, the blue skies and oxygen-rich air and diverse ecosystems, is a temporary condition. A brief chapter in a much longer story. Earth has been many things. A molten ball of rock, a frozen snowball, a green ocean world beneath orange skies, a microbial paradise, and for a geological eye blink, a world of animals and plants and humans. What will it be next? We don't know. But the rocks remember, and they're whispering a warning. The Archaean didn't end because it was destined to. It ended because of a series of improbable events driven by life itself that fundamentally transformed the planet. Oxygen was an accident, a waste product, a pollutant that almost destroyed the biosphere before it saved it. And now, we're the ones producing the waste. Carbon dioxide, methane, pollutants that are changing the atmosphere, the oceans, the climate. We're running the experiment in reverse, taking a planet that spent billions of years oxygenating and filling it with greenhouse gases again. The Archaean didn't care. It was a stable state, a planetary equilibrium. Earth could have stayed that way forever. The question is, can we? Standing in Marble Bar today, under a scorching sun in a barren landscape, it's hard to imagine this place was once at the bottom of a green ocean, covered in microbial mats, under an orange sky lit by blue auroras. But the rocks don't lie. They preserve the memory of a world so different from ours that it might as well be another planet. And yet, it's the same planet, our planet, the only one we have. The Archaean lasted 2 billion years. Humans have been around for 300,000. We are 1/10,000th of the Archaean's duration. A flicker, a spark. But in that flicker, we've achieved something no microbial mat ever could. We've asked questions, built tools, left the planet, if only briefly. We've looked back at Earth from space and seen it for what it is. A pale blue dot, fragile, unique, home. The microbes of the Archaean transformed the planet without knowing it. They changed the atmosphere, the oceans, the climate, purely as a byproduct of their existence. They didn't choose to oxygenate the Earth. They didn't plan it. It just happened. We have a choice. We can learn from the Archaean, understand the forces that shape planets, use that knowledge to protect the biosphere, to stabilize the climate, to ensure that the window stays open not just for us, but for whatever comes after us. Or we can ignore it, continue down the path we're on, and hope that the planet, resilient as it is, will find a new equilibrium. One that might not include us. The Archaean Earth survived. Life survived. But the life that emerged from the Archaean was nothing like the life that entered it. Oxygen was a catastrophe for the anaerobes. Most of them went extinct. The ones that survived retreated to the deep ocean, the deep crust, the dark places where oxygen can't reach. They're still there, waiting, in Kidd Creek Mine and 1,000 other hidden refuges. If Earth transitions again, if we push it too far, we might join them. Not extinct, but marginalized, clinging to survival in a world we no longer recognize. The Archaean is not the past. It's a possibility, a a state the planet can return to under the right or wrong conditions. And the more we learn about it, the more we realize how precarious our existence really is. 3 billion years ago, Earth was an alien world. Green oceans, orange skies, blue auroras, microbial cities. It was alive, thriving, successful, but it was nothing like home. Today, Earth is a blue marble, oxygen-rich, biodiverse, beautiful, and temporary. The real question isn't what was Earth like 3 billion years ago. The real question is, how long until it returns to that state, with or without us? And do we have the wisdom to prevent it? The rocks at Marble Bar are 3 billion years old. They've seen everything. The rise of life, the oxygenation of the planet, the evolution of animals, the emergence of intelligence, and they'll outlast us. They'll be here long after we're gone, silent witnesses to whatever comes next. But for now, they're talking. If we listen,